So welcome everybody. So this is UX Talk. Thanks for joining. It is season 3. Please check out our LinkedIn page and even YouTube channel and podcast for previous talks. Uh, yes. So now this is very first our group discussion on ADP platform. Recently, we are collaborated with ADPList and UXTalk. Uh, Everybody knows what is ADPList. So it is awesome design platform. So it is like, uh, personally, I am also mentor on this platform, and we have a almost community of 7,000 plus mentors where people are getting knowledge, discussions. So Felix has started this ADP platform, and we are doing wonders on this platform. Joe is one of a great mentor there also, and so yes, before we start, just quickly, what is UX Talk? UX Talk, I started during COVID times. Everybody know how the pandemic was there, and we started this webinar activity and this convert into one platform. So aim behind UX Talk is give a platform so that we can discuss on design related, UX related, all things, and we have a great time evening we can spend discussing on the design itself. So I will not YouTube channel name is UXTalks in UXTalks IN is a it's a platform we can check. Yes, so before we start our today's topic, and we have a very great speaker, so I will introduce with everyone. So agenda is like, it is like a group discussion. So I have a set of questions. So I will ask Joey, and he will enlighten us on this very wonderful topic. Then I will open forum for discussion. So if I have any question related to, please use Zoom chat. You can ask question. And while asking question, if you feel free to on your video so that Joey also see who is asking question. Okay, so that will be interactions will be more. So without wasting time, let's start on today's UX talk. So welcome everybody. So we have a very wonderful, very interesting speaker with us, Joey. Uh, he's like past 20 years in this field and giving services to the Fortune 500 companies. We'll discuss more about his journey and everything. So let's start today's. So we can start with Joy. You can introduce yourself and give us a little bit background, your journey, because I personally believe everyone's journey is inspirational. And last 20 years, you are doing wonderful things, stuff in a design and everything. So quickly, you can just tell us about yourself, and then we jump on our main core topic.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. Obviously, this is fantastic. I love that these things have popped up through the pandemic. It's making education so easily accessible, especially for people who are just getting into UX and just getting into design. And it's just dynamite. Back to me. My name is Joe Cahill. I have been a graphic designer, web designer, UX person, creative director, you name it, I've done it in the industry for the last 22 years, which is terrifying to say out loud because that means I am old as shit, and it is too much to bear sometimes when I actually put it in perspective. And I've been working with small companies, large companies. I do a ton of freelance. But over the last 20 years, it's watching this evolution of what I started out as in print design and in the early 2000s, learning how to code in HTML and JavaScripting, and where all that kind of fell into place to what is now modern UX and what is modern like deployment and best practices. So it's been so fascinating to watch and be there. And it's also so weird because as we're talking, it's going to be like, there's been so many people shifting into this industry. So you guys are a lot, if you are coming into the industry new, you're coming into an industry that has so many years of time to polish and grow and kind of get rid of all the nonsense that we've been doing and really flow in like a very structured way, which is why topics like this, like IA and sitemaps and the beginning of the process of how we work with our clients and how we build the best product for our users is so important. So yeah, like and again, like harkening back to the ADPList, I put the org, ADPList.org, if you want to book a mentoring session. You know, there's tons of mentors out there, all different disciplines. And for me, it's given me a place to kind of be there for people that are just starting out. So I think it's, I didn't have any mentors growing up in this industry. It was all self-taught. It was all, you know, grinding for the sake of grinding. And we're trying to pass that knowledge down to you guys so you guys can work on more important things, which I think is also pretty big, which is knowing where you're going and being able to focus on the real key parts of this work. So let's start off with that basic question, right? Like,
Right.
what is your IA? Like, as you're doing all this, like, what is your main, like, why are you doing this? Let's start with that. The why is the biggest thing, right? So as we're going through the design process, I'm gonna quickly share my screen. Where did Zoom go? I love this because every time we could work remote for 100 years and it will always be something that we're gonna mess around with as we're sharing our screen. Okay, where am I? So I'm sure a lot of people, boom, all right. A lot of people have seen this, right? Y'all see the design process. It starts with discovery, where we do all of our research. It leads into concept, where we start building these items, building these artifacts so we can really influence the design and influence the wireframing and influence our overall journey. So this is where we're going to be starting. And then we're going to go into that design phase. We're going to hit it real hard and we're going to end up putting that fresh coat of paint, and then possibly, if given the opportunity with the client or place you're working, you're going to be able to prototype it out and then do some iterations, like maybe do some user testing if possible. If not, you're going to go right into that development and then work with your engineers, which we could have a whole other conversation about working with engineers and best practices and how that all comes together. And then it's all about optimization. Our job is about making sure that we are, with using the term lightly, like agile. And we're constantly running through this stuff, right? Like we're putting it out there, getting insights, pulling it back, learning from it, adjusting it, going back out there. So I think it's such a great avenue to kind of be in, because our job is literally to keep getting better. It's not like once you're done, you're done. Which, when coming from a print design background years and years ago, it was so weird for me to like go to press and being like, okay, if there's anything wrong with this file, it's going to be on me. If there's a misspelling, to working in the web where it's like, oh, we can switch that around. We can change that. So yeah, like, and when we're in this in between the phase of getting our research and understanding where discovery comes from, doing our competitive analysis, we end up with like these three core items, and one of which is the IA. We're going to touch on sitemaps a little bit. I'm going to talk content to the day is long, because content is so important to the growth of each one of our experiences. But sitting there right in the middle and talking about that IA, you know, what actually is it, right? So as you can see, my slides all over the place because I use this for clients sometimes, which is so much fun. The IA is our way to really set the journey in place. It's really our way of understanding what the audience needs are and then marrying it with a sitemap, which we're going to touch on a little bit later, but really focusing in on how we pull in a user from all the avenues that could possibly be. Like this one, this is from a client that I worked with. You know, everything from where that traffic comes from. You know, does it come from the web? Does it come from social? Does it come from trade sites? Does it come from, you know, advertising, and what's their entry point and where do they go? Where do all their interactions come into play? So, and the best part about like a lot of this work is there's 1,000 different ways to design these. And you'll see some instances have, you know, action diagrams with, you know, the diamonds and triangles and squares, and some of them like this. Like I try to make it in the purest form for especially some of our clients, because only we understand certain things, because it's up to us to kind of build them out, but making it down to that simplest form. So, you know, as you're going through, and this is the best part about this, because going into an item like this and you're working with a client and you're working with engineers and you're working with product managers, having these types of roadmaps to let us know where we're going and let us understand the user is not just for us. You know, it's good for us to have, but it's really for everybody. In all the time that I've been working, especially more recently, one of my current jobs, having everybody on the same page on what we're building and how we're building is just great. Like I said, we can talk about relationships between design, development, and product all day long, but it all comes down to communication. And items like this are that core of communication that we're going to lead with.
Great. Thanks for this wonderful introduction. But let's start now, question answer and discussions. So hope our participants are also ready. So if you have any question, please put question in a Zoom chat. So we'll take, or even to ask question, just we'll let you an open forum. Then you can ask question. So yes, you talk about sitemap and information architecture. So there is always a confusion between, so whether it is an actual sitemap or is architecture. So
yeah, so the things like this. So there's a really weird thing about our industry, right? People don't use the terminology correctly, and it's up to us to, and I don't want to use the term correct them, but it's correct them. Like we have to make sure that everybody is on the same page with terminology. And this is one of the big ones. Like people think the term information architecture or sitemap are interchangeable, and they're different. They're very different due to the fact that a sitemap is your inventory. A sitemap is if you're building, let's say, a website or a mobile app, every page, every screen, everything that's involved in it. Like that would be I've built some sitemaps that are multi-layers. Like we build them out into what that hierarchy is. Like as you have I'm going to use like these terminologies like that we used when I was working at a couple of different companies, but it's like an L1. That's your level one. That level one tier is your main navigation. Those are the things that like are when you're on a website, it's what you see when you land on a page. It's when you're in an app and you tap, you know, the hamburger menu. That's your L1. When you start dwindling down the pages, it becomes L2, L3. You'll have pop-ups, you'll have interactions, you'll have all these other things that we have to take inventory around, because again, going for what we need from like a design point of view, we don't want to miss anything. And then from an engineer's point of view, they don't want to be surprised with new pages. So when you go through that sitemap and you really have to think through, all right, so if we have, and this happens, and I will say this happens to me a lot, always miss pages. I'm not going to lie. Okay, we have a blog, right? So then inside your main website, there's a blog area. All right, there's no problem. So within the blog area, there's going to be blog pages. So it's like making sure you don't forget those. If there's articles or there's a news feed or there's something like that. And then from a design point of view and a UX point of view, do they have the same look and feel? Do they have a different design? So then that also creates now not more pages, but maybe more templates that we have to work around. It's always about making sure we're not gonna we're not going to miss anything. Because even as we scope, because for me, I'm a big person when it comes to scoping in general. So it's like understanding what our capabilities of, how we're doing it. I have designers point their stories and have them understand like how long it's going to take to work and stuff like this. Like one of the questions I see up there is, how do you create a sitemap? It literally starts with looking at what your story is, you know, like what is your site, what is your app, what is it doing? So if you're starting with like a regular base, let's say a base website, let's say you're starting with your portfolio, for instance, because no matter how many times we create a portfolio in our career, sometimes we forget that we should be using like UX methodologies around it. And we're just like, it's our site, we should just build it. Even for my site, I went and I was like, all right, so I'm going to have my homepage, I'm going to have my UX page, my about page, my public speaking page because I'm chatty, and a contact page, right? And then I was like, well, do I want to give up on graphic design? I still do a lot of branding. Let's add that in the L1 too. So now I have those. So now from there, you have to think, and then again, this goes back to, it may be something that evolves over time because you may build out a page like for the UX stuff. Like I'm going to have each page underneath the UX is going to have a case study page. So that's going to be a totally different template because the narrative's different. Underneath UX, do I want to build a page around my methodologies and just make that a core part of my site? I didn't, because every case study is really a story around your methodology. Your about page, you know, like, do you do something that's specific to yourself? Like, are you an artist? You want to have like other information that you want to link out to, you know? So there's so many things that like, as you're building pages, you'll be like, oh, okay, so we need pages for this, this, and this now. So you add it to the sitemap. Our job is to be flexible, right? Like you're never going to be able to get through everything at once. I think it's something that if you work with a good person from like a content perspective and writing a good content hierarchy, you may be able to identify where these things land off later. But I think it's really up to what happens. Like even when I build out apps, like I was recently working with this company that does like a mobile app, a mobile telco company in Mexico. They wanted to build in NFTs into their system, right? So it was like, all right, so where do we put them in? Here, here, and here. And then it was like, oh no, so we need its own settings menu. And inside the setting menu, we need like privacy pages, and we need blockchain IDs, and we need all this other stuff. So it's like, it really does kind of grow with it. So I think there's no way to anticipate how big something can get or how many like tiers go into it. You know, like I recently 2 years ago, I was working with a financial company here in New York, and we started auditing their site from what they currently had and putting that into a sitemap and reorganizing all of it. And I think it was almost 150 pages. And I'm like, this is crazy. Some of these pages that came up in like a search of what's there, I was like, oh my God, where do we go? Where do we put these? Like, how do people get to them? And we found out they're like third-party pages that come in. So I'm like, all right, so these should be housed somewhere within the site so people can direct to them. So it's like, then we have to reorg, like from that discovery session of working with a client that already has an existing product, we have to go back and look at what they have and like really dwindle down to a reorganization of what's going on, because part of the sitemap and the IA is about the user. You know, it's all about how they're going to navigate. And that's what both of these kind of sit side by side, but one is more of that high level of like when you're cleaning a room, here's all the stuff that's around. But the IA is like, all right, so some of these things that are coming from the laundry, those have to go to a specific place, while the things that are currently on the floor have to go to this specific place, or these things have to go to a drawer for my socks, or these things are like jewelry or Apple Watch bands because I buy too many of those. So it's like understanding how taking inventory of what's there and how we're going to execute it. I'm chatty as hell, and I love talking about this stuff.
Sure.
So I will definitely go off on a tangent here and there. I saw a very interesting question in here. It says, when I'm creating an IA, sometimes I don't understand how much information do we offer and then categorize, because sometimes I feel I get too detailed. Where do we draw the line? Oh, so there is never too much detail. If you keep falling down the rabbit hole of like, oh no, we have to think of this. Oh no, we have to think of this. Oh no, that's good, because you never want to leave a stone unturned, right? Like you want to make sure you cover everything. Like this week alone, I was having conversations about like this insurance application, and I was like, well, what if the users do this? And what if the users do this? And what if the users come from here? And you have two personas in the same form, like one's an agent and one's a user. I'm like, and it's, being able to get these questions out in the open. Sometimes you'll hear somebody say like, listen, we don't have to worry about that. That's a fringe case, which it means it just sits on that outside skirting of what the normal user would do. But if we could still like come up with an idea or have it as a later backlog item, just do it. Stay as detailed as possible. Like you can totally deep dive into, especially with a lot of commercial products that are out there, like things that go to consumers, right? Like now their avenues of social change. Are they learning from somewhere in Facebook, if people still use Facebook, LinkedIn? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? Is it WhatsApp? It's like each one of those bring a different use case. Like I'm sadly wearing the shirt today for one of my side companies. I have a bicycle company with my friend. We just recently launched our 2022 product line, and it was like building content for each one of these avenues. And I was like, listen, like we have to think about if this user comes in, like basically our desktop website is useless. It should be mobile only, because all of our traffic comes from mobile, and keeping that in mind. And he's like, well, dealers will go from the website. And I'm like, all right, so the dealer specific website should be catered slightly different. So it's like, it's always thinking through every little detail. So always stay as curious as possible and get so deep in the weeds when it comes to this. It's always good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Continue.
Oh, what were you gonna say?
No, just I was so I'm just saying there are some good questions are there in chat box. So we'll take definitely. I think you already have started discussion on that. So I did not interrupt on that.
No, I have another one that I'm super interested in.
Yeah. So I have also questions. I'm asking those questions, right? Okay. So where we start actually? Okay. So what thing we should start with doing information architecture, and what tools required, or you can put just light on that, because see, earlier it was supposed to be architecture done by technical guys. Now, as in UX era, that this responsibility is now we supposed to do as a UX practitioner. We expect that the UX people should create architecture, because sometimes I get this question, so it should be a simple diagram, or we need to create a flow chart. So like a sitemap, architecture, flow charts, because in UX people mostly they come from a design background, so then they don't know the technical jargon, what mean by triangle, what mean by, so you can just put some light on these things.
Yeah. So if I'm working in a project that I can literally put in that we're going to be end to end, because I'm sure a lot of people out there know, despite our best efforts of wanting to do the entire UX process, companies don't give us the time or money or management to do it. So if I'm able to do it from scratch and I'm able to do a full discovery where I'm able to build a sitemap and build an IA and build personas, it literally lives in one Figma file. Like I have, starting from the beginning of when I'm doing that research, what research is going to lead into this journey. So if I'm doing competitive analysis, or I'm doing an audit, or I'm doing a SWOT, or I'm doing, interviews, those will kind of live within like decks because we have to present them. But once it goes into like the work, the UX work, like a sitemap, I have the first page is a sitemap. Second page is usually an IA. Third page is usually a design system if I'm not using one that's already established. So it's like, and I want them all there because as I'm building out wires, I want to be able to quickly reference back and forth. Like, okay, if I'm using the sitemap and I realize I need to add pages in, I just make sure that they're there, and everybody has links, and it's in a Jira ticket, or it's something sitting within there. I use tools like Figma plugins, like Autoflow, where it's like you just click on things and it creates the relationship lines.
Right.
I create components for different page templates. So it's like, I'm like you said, like I'm an artist at heart. So it's when it comes to technical stuff, especially when I work with back-end developers who and this is again, the funny part of our world is the term information architecture means two different things for two different people. So for developers, an IA is a lot more of like that back-end data mapping that pulls them forward, while for us, it's more of that visual representation of a user's journey, which again, there's also user journeys where it's more behavior-based versus more flow-based. So I think this is where it's, it's so interesting because then again, it always goes back to all the information we can provide. I saw a question in there about audience map. This is another thing that we kind of work on. Like as we're building that IA and we're understanding what the general flow is. And you'll hear the phrase like from some people, like the happy path, like what's the most common user's experience? What will be somebody who's a targeted persona? What is their journey going to look like? What is their, as we go through in the pre-pandemic, we were in an office together and we were doing like Post-its on the wall, and we were able to really, really play together in like a sandbox of like, okay, so if we do this and we do this, and what do you think? And, products there and engineering's there, and people are able to really like tell that story together. Now we're kind of doing it in the same way with Miro or FigJam, or again, like having these things all readily available for us to kind of always go back to and, tell that story. Because I love the art of storytelling for us is like a career, but even more so in the products we build, like make sure that is there, because we need to make sure if a user comes to open our app or go to a website or go to the dashboard for back-end work, it's like, how do they understand? Like nobody should be in an IA and be confused. Nobody should be on a sitemap and be like, why are these pages here? Do they need to be here? Like, this is an extra step, like making sure we think through. And this goes back to like how we build sites and how we build applications. If you want somebody to go to a different area, like don't have them rely on a navigation. If it's part of the story of a page, like push them into it, push them where they need to go. Because the last thing, and I'm sure we've all known it, nobody wants to be inconvenienced. Nobody wants to be frustrated when they're using a product. And I'm sure we all have stories of some instance where we were working in on a site or in something, and it just became like why is this like this? My favorite thing to say is we're all students of UX, right? Like for us as practitioners, to our friends who are maybe like in different industries, to our family who doesn't really know how an iPhone works, like they all have a view of UX. Most recently, Instagram is Meta is huge on changing UX. I just recently had an update where they moved the messages down to the bottom in the main navigation. And I was like, I still, from muscle memory, go to the top to hit the button.
Right.
And now I'm like, oh, I got to remember, I have to go down to the bottom. And there was a small part of me in the first couple of days, I'm like, damn, this is annoying. Like, but I know that this was a roadmap. These were things that were discussed and thought through, and messaging has become a big thing. Same thing when they moved the shopping down to the bottom nav and moved the likes up, because shopping is the main part of how we use these apps. So it's very interesting being both like somebody who builds and somebody who uses it, you know? So it's like, there's always moments where I always go, this is bad UX. Like, or why are you sending me on this journey? A quick response to one of the questions, designing for complex B2B products. So business to business is one of the weirdest industries to be in, because depending on what type of B2B work it is, it could be super easy to be directed to one type of persona within the business targeted. Or in my experiences, I worked with American Express, and it was talking to small businesses and large businesses and giant corporations. So it's like, how do you make sure that the information you have is enough to, and this was actually part of my entire journey there, was rewriting the narrative, rewriting the sitemaps, the IAs for this B2B side. And it was a ton of research. Like, it was a year's worth of testing homepages, testing journeys, user interviews, understanding what everybody's expectations were. And it was so a lot. And the big problem with what you mentioned here is there's never enough time to do enough research. Like, to be honest, this is why UX research, UXR is such a big thing. If we have the ability to do the research, like, we have to be advocates for it. If you don't get enough information out of what your goals are for what you need to do, you have to say, listen, I understand we need to get this done, but would you rather get it done right? Or would you rather just release, and then hopefully we learn from the release? So I think there's two ways that we could do it. In certain instances, pushing a release of a product could be detrimental to the life cycle of the product, right? Like, you could push something out, and if it doesn't do well, if it affects acquisition or it affects conversion, that ain't good. And it's like, this is where, for us, we have to keep in mind our users' goals and our business goals. And if we want to be successful, if we want to build a successful product, we have to make sure that we are confident in what we're doing. And if we're not, we should test it. You know, like, this is where test and learn is such a huge thing. I love navigation test and learns a bunch of times, because the navigation is such a key part of how people use a site. And even in application, like, I've done user testing and user research around just how people find the organization of content inside an app. And people go, oh, this doesn't make sense. And my favorite is, like, we love to go to iconography, right? Like, icons make complete sense to a lot of us. A little house means home. We get it. But when you start going to more unique types of products where an icon may not make the most sense, it's always good to get that feedback, because this all falls into that IA, and this all falls into the sitemap, and the navigation is making sure people know. If you're building an investment app, just putting a chart isn't going to make as much sense to somebody, because what is the chart for? Like, is this my global dividends? Is this what I'm looking at from a market perspective? Is, like, what does it mean? And I think that goes for a lot of us, as we're, we have to fight to make sure that these sitemaps and IAs and user journeys all make the most sense. Like, label UX writing, another big, I would say, an unsung hero of the UX world. because the idea of I've worked with clients that want to shove full sentences in a button. It drives me nuts. I'm like, it just should be something simple and actionable and makes it go and lets the user understand what they're doing. Same thing with like a navigation. If you just do like about us, and then it opens up to like 14 pages. This is a lot about you. Like I was just expecting a one pager of, oh, here's our company and here's what we do. And this is like, this is a whole lot of information. So like maybe changing it to our values or something else. Like it's so important. I'm going to take a break, see if anybody else has questions.
Right. Yeah. Great. Yeah, sure. I think you given a very long answer. And I think you covered a lot of answers there. Quickly now, next move on, how to evaluate things, architecture, and what is the challenging part you see when you want to evaluate? Maybe, is there any methodology you can suggest for that? Or one of the question we have that about card sort.
Yeah.
So we can just discuss on.
I love a good card sorting exercise. And also, if you guys ever do things like this, card sorting exercises, throw it in your portfolio, because honestly, I love to see it. So this goes back to that thing of auditing, right? Whenever we're given an opportunity to do a full rebuild, or we're doing some type of IA work in general, we have to understand, like it goes without saying that if we're taking something that's massive, like if you use like Amazon as an example, because that sounds like a nightmare in general, taking their content, the hierarchy of how they present their products. And I've seen tons of case studies around this, of simplifying it or making it more useful or making it more understanding. And it's like, we have to always, the methodology that I always end up using is, I love, like I said, card sort. I have Post-its all over this house, much to the chagrin of my poor girlfriend, who finds Post-its everywhere because I just have ideas and I just put them on. Is we have to take a step back, right? We have to take, and we get and this is something that we do as like designers in general, we get very focused on like what we're doing, but sometimes you have to take a step back and look and be like, okay, what are we accomplishing? Who are we accomplishing it for? And what's the most effective way to get there? Because those main questions will help you be like, okay, currently, this is how they do it. The feedback from them is that, or the feedback from the client is, nobody gets to these secondary and tertiary pages. All right, so that's one of the pain points of the client. Big question, do the users actually need them? Maybe. And then how do we kind of pull it up? And how do we make it more accessible to them? And then I'm big, like I said, I'm big on Figma. I love leaving stuff in there. I love leaving Post-its all around here, where I'm just like putting it down on my desk here and like looking at them like, all right, what do we do next? How do we go about it next? Because also for us, a lot of our job, as we all know, is explaining our work. We're literally in the nightmarish realm of being in elementary school. And it's like, when you do a math problem, it's always like, please explain how you got there. And you're just like, I just did the math. As an adult, we're still doing that, but in such a way that we have to make people understand it. Because some people, it's just like, well, if it's not, this is my favorite. It works now. Does it? If it works now, you wouldn't call me. Like, it's one of those things that we have to always be sensitive around people's understanding of the work too. So we have to go about it in such a way that it just makes sense. So for us, like from a technical perspective in our mind, we know what the goals are. We know from our user research and from our maybe interviews, user interviews, stakeholder interviews, like what their expectations are. So we have to illustrate it out. So like going back to the idea of that methodology, the methodology is just clearly creating that path of organization and coming to a client or coming to a meeting saying like, okay, here's what we got. here's what we determined that these user goals are, and here's how we're going to get them there. This is how we're going to push them down the funnel from an acquisition point of view, a conversion point of view, in the smoothest way possible. I think it's always that notion, and this is what we do. We lead with empathy, right? Like that's our job. Making it feel accessible to the people that we're talking to, because I've been in so many conversations where I get like super in the weeds of my head on technical jargon that the people just look and they'll be like, so what does that mean? If you ever hear somebody say that, that's bad news, because that means it's not clear. Like I'm super big on analogies. I'm super big on putting faces to names. I think when you build a persona, right, and you're presenting a user flow or an IA for that persona, talk about them like they're in the room. Like, so I have my favorite was going back to B2B. It was talking through how we make, I'm a New Yorker, born and raised, no surprise by the accent. How we make like a mom and pop bakery in New York understand that they get the most benefits from being a member of like a financial services company. So I was like, all right, so we have Marie, she owns this bakery in Brooklyn, best cannolis in Brooklyn, go check it out. She wants to expand a business. She has a son, Anthony, not the smartest tool in the shed, but she thinks he can handle a new place. How are we going to make sure that she understands that she gets more out of her business to business solutions from us? And she gets an email saying, we're offering free financing with 0% interest. And how do we go get her into that page and then having her understand that this is made for her to buy more supplies, open that second business, get new stoves for all the bakeries. Like it's, once you put somebody in the seat at the computer or on the phone, then people start, so for some odd reason, even though these people are not real, some people start to care. Like they're like, oh my God, yeah, I know Marie. She owns the bakery down the block from me in Queens. Like it's one of those things that it's our job to always, like I said, make it illustrate it, make it feel real. So I'm not sure if that even answers the question. I fell off into a weird ass tangent talking about people, but
sure. No,
I think it's one of those things.
So I think yesterday also we are talking about one point. People are coming from a different backgrounds nowadays in the UX field. And when they see information architecture is like too much technical or too much something, because a lot of terms, as you said correctly, a lot of terms nowadays we use user flow, sitemap, architecture, workflows. So there is too much thing, overwhelm of terminologies and how we can. And I'm not from a design background, I'm not from a technical background, but still I'm working in the UX field. So that is something nowadays people are facing. So what you say about, or what your advice for these, your youngster, they want to build their career as a UX practitioner, because itself is a huge, we cannot cover this in a 1 hour, but still I'm trying to touch base many aspects here so that our audience gets at least some insight and they can start think process in their brain. So yeah.
It's so funny because when I started in UX, in modern UX, I would go for job interviews. And I was a developer at this point for like 14, 15 years, a creative director for 14, 15 years. I would go for these interviews. I'm like, oh, I could do this job in my sleep. I do it every day. And people are just like, oh, well, where's your wireframe? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, where's your initial sketches of it? And I pull out a sketchbook and I'd be like, oh, no problem. Oh, where's your case study? I don't have a case. Where's your sitemap? And I'm like, what? You mean like the XML file that I submit to Google so it crawls right? And they're like, no. And I think that's the thing. It's there like you're right. There's so much terminology. There's so much to learn. And again, super big on analogies. I always refer to our process as like getting dressed in the morning, right? Like we need to put certain things in order so we can leave the house. Like you won't put your shoes on and then put your socks on top of them. Like you know, so it's always, and again, this is always a big thing because it depends on what you can actually get done. But if you're going to build an application or you're going to build a product, you're going to build a site, you can't properly build it without a sitemap to know how many pages you're going to do. You're not going to be able to write like really good content and understand a user's journey if you don't know who they are. You know, you're not going to be able to do that to understand their goals if they don't have an IA. You know, like this is your socks, your underwear, your undershirt before you get out the door. You know, like I think it's all the pieces that we have to just know. And this is what happens like throughout the last 2 years when I've been doing the ADPList and I'm meeting people from all over the world talking about getting into UX, and they're doing like the Google certification course, or they're doing boot camps or General Assembly or all these things. They're like, oh, it's so much to understand. Like, do you normally do a full discovery with all of these things? And I said, no, but it's always good to know of them. Like, you never want a plumber or a construction person to come by with a toolbox that's empty. Like, you want them to know everything they know that's in there. Maybe there's things in there that just happen to be in there and they don't know how to use them, but at least they know of them. You know, like I think that's part of the journey of this job, right? Like, and then think about it. We're this far. AR, VR is on the rise. Like, how are we going to integrate that? How are we going to create a sitemap for an experience that's not digital flat? It's digital deep. You know, like even when I've worked on some AR projects where it's like still creating an IA for something that's 360. And it's such a weird thing, but it's so, when you get it done and you're like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like it's just a fascinating part of our evolution. So once you get into this role, stay up on things like this. Perfect example. You know, obviously trolling Medium for whatever articles are there. Remember, Medium's written by regular people. Nothing's validated. Take it with a grain of salt. You know, constantly learn. Whenever somebody puts out a new hardware or software at all, just read about it. You know, there's the new MacBooks, the new iPhones are coming out in September, new Google Pixels are coming out, new AR, VR technology, all of these things that are going to lead us. It's up for us as designers and UX people to just kind of be knowledgeable of them. Like this thing I just had a conversation about was tablet. I'm like, we're still talking about tablet? I'm like, tablet just runs desktop size now. Like we're not at the point where it's 768 where I'm holding like an iPad mini, because even that resolution is up. You know, like it's so fascinating for us to be in this realm and constantly grow with it.
I think we covered pretty much many things here. So
always many things. The problem is with this whole industry is that you can go down a rabbit hole. Like much like building your sitemaps, like you'll have ideas that'll grow and that you'll follow. It's like it's so exciting.
So yeah. So how you see the future? Because now we are just in just a couple of minutes. You talk about the future or the technology which is coming. We are moving towards machine learning, artificial intelligence. In short, we are moving towards screenless technologies now. So if there is no screen, there is no user flow, then what I'm doing with information architecture, what exactly, where we are going now, or where you see, where we see UX practitioner struggling this, and how they can contribute to this thing.
Honestly, as much as I'm super positive about everything, so it's like, I don't think we're ever going to struggle. I think as long as we're hungry and we're driven to solve problems, there's always going to be problems. And it's so funny. I just have, I use Time Hop on my phone. I'm on a streak. I don't know why I'm not giving it up. But yesterday there was a post from 12 years ago. I got super excited that I was able to listen to Major League Baseball games when I turned off the app, when I would go multitask. That was that's such a commonplace feature now that I was like legit multiple exclamation points going like, oh my God, I can now listen to the Mets while I'm doing other things on my phone 12 years ago. Like, it's such a weird thing that was such a big feature for me. And I think that's where everything goes continuous, right? Like, even with Figma, from a tool perspective, I can build products faster because variations inside components have become smoother. You know, I think it's just getting excited for it. Like I said, whenever there's a new technology, whenever something's out there, like, look into it, like, play with it. Go to, your local Microsoft store and look at their HoloLens, like how, like, just how, like, like years, if you ever seen the movie Minority Report, it's an old movie. Like, that I thought was like never capable. We would never be able to have screens in front of us that we'd be able to like tap like nothing and make it happen. But we're basically on the verge of that with AR lenses. I have very, very bad vision. I'm like dreading the day that I have to get contact lenses that I'm going to have to wear every day. That'll be prescription, because I know my healthcare will be like, sorry, you keep losing your AR lenses. Right. Like, please stop wearing them when you go out drinking. And I'll be like, but I need to go find my way home. Even I'm gesturing towards my phone. Google has done Google Maps in AR.
Right.
And it's smart enough to know when I'm walking. So I hold it up and it'll show me where to go and where to make a left. And then if I start walking with it, it tells me to put my phone down because it knows that I'm going to end up getting hurt. I'm bound to happen anyway. But that's our responsibility too, right? Like, as we're building new technology, how do we not only build things for the better of our users, but build things to keep our users safe? And that goes from like a mental perspective, as like, don't be in the phone too much, to a physical perspective of things like focus time on like, and with iOS, of like when I get in a car, I'm notorious for being on my phone in the car. Nobody's watching from like the New York State DOT. They're not going to get me. Cops aren't going to get me. But it's like, I'm notorious for doing it because I'm so connected. And if I see a notification, I want to read it. But now using focus time, the second my phone connects to my my Bluetooth, that's it. I'm dead to the world. Barring like I have like people who are on the favorites list or whatever. But that's still the thing. It's like, we have responsibility. Like, it's such a weird, when people ask me what I do, and I'm sure everybody on this call has had this question, what do you do for a living? And then you don't know how to answer them. I'm just like, yeah, I work in an industry where we make everything work. We make everything super easy for people to use and understand and enjoy. And that's it. Like,
that is the same problem. Even after 20 years, still my parent asks sometimes, what you do for living? So I just sit in front of PC and I'm doing.
I had to put the link to my home screen, the link to my homepage on my mom's home screen on her iPhone with my, with the icon, so she could be like, what's your son do? Just hit the button. It'll get goes right to my website. It'll tell them what I do. She goes, you make clothing. Well, that's not a lie, but it's not a lie. You make advertising. Yeah. You build websites. Careful, because there's a difference between designing websites and building them. My developer days are far over. Like,
great.
But it's still to this day. No idea what I do.
Okay. I think great. I don't want to take your Sundays morning too much. I think, yeah. Thanks for
design on a Sunday morning. It's better than this. This is a great life.
Great. I think we try to touch base, and please connect with Joey on LinkedIn. ADPList, he's a mentor there, and maybe I know it is very rush time and we are discussing so many things, but please do connect with on ADP, on UXTalks. You can connect me. I'm also a mentor on ADPList. So UXTalk, we are this again season 3. There is a good pipeline speakers. We are there. So even if you have something in mind, that discussion, any topic or any subject, please suggest so that we can take up this topic. And maybe I think Joy, I would love, we can have one more session in a different topic and
Whenever you want. What do the kids say? Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe on UXTalks on YouTube. I think it's always good. I think again, this goes back to, as we're all professionals and as we're all doing our job, like, you're gonna get stuck and you're gonna look for some kind of guidance.
right.
Obviously, I'm not saying it just to bookmark because I'm here, but like bookmark his YouTube, or like follow what you can on LinkedIn, because you could always go back and get some information. You know, I think I have a ton of books here. I constantly reference them. Like, where did I see this? Like, where did it go? You know, this is just such a wonderful thing. You have a community of design around you as well. It's like, reach out to people who are your peers. Like, we're all in this together. We all want one thing, and that's all for us to learn and grow. And things like UXTalks is such a great way to get an entry point, even if you have to listen to me for an hour.
I think we have a good suggestion that you can for next talk from Web 3.0, and let's see, we can plan more.
Okay, that'll be a good one.
Right. Yes. So thanks everyone. Thanks Joy for your early morning. You give us a time for community. Do watch on ADPList, on UXTalk, on LinkedIn for our upcoming sessions. We have wonderful speakers. Once again, thanks everyone for taking Sundays evening, morning, for listening us, and hope there is something insight about that triggers you to explore more. As Joy said, keep on practicing, keep on reading, because that one's only thing you can give us something written back to your client, customer, and meaningful information architectures. Uh, Thanks once again. Have a great Monday rush from tomorrow, and keep working. And
Whatever day it is.
okay, our Monday will start soon. Your Monday will little bit. You have to enjoy Sunday. Great.
Don't rush my Monday on me. Everybody, create something awesome today.
Yes. Bye. Take care. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.